Ever catch yourself making a decision and think, wait, was that totally irrational?
Happens to the best of us.
Right. Well, today, we're diving deep into that question. What does it actually mean to be rational?
It's a question that philosophers have been trying to figure out for centuries. Luckily for us, we've got this amazing lecture from a professor of cognitive science to help guide this deep dive.
And this isn't some boring, stuffy lecture. It brings up ancient paradoxes and mind-bending research.
The good stuff.
Exactly, the good stuff. But first, I think most of us, when we think about rationality, we think about logic, right? Like if you can follow the rules of logic, you're good to go.
Seems intuitive, right?
Yeah.
But as it turns out, being rational is more complex than just being good at logic. Our expert uses this example of the Euthyphro paradox. Have you ever heard of that?
Isn't that the whole thing about whether something is just good on its own or if it's good because someone said it is?
You got it. And that question gets to the heart of where our standards for rationality come from. Are we just following a set of rules that somebody handed us, or is there something about our nature that allows us to even recognize what's rational?
It's cool when you see a Venn diagram.
Yeah.
You just know that the overlapping part means something that both circles share. It just clicks.
Yeah. And that aha moment points to this inherent capacity we have for recognizing rational principles.
Interesting.
It's not just blindly following logic. It's
Wait.
actively engaging with it.
Fascinating. So if it's not all about logic, were those researchers onto something when they started looking at performance versus competence? We have the capacity for rationality. We just mess up sometimes.
You're talking about the idea that maybe we're just having an off day, right? Like, you've had way too much coffee. Think straight.
But then you have these other cases where it seems like the error is more than a temporary glitch. We have a problem with the way we're thinking.
That's where this research from Stanovich and West comes in. They found that a lot of the irrational errors we make, they're not random. They actually happen systematically.
Really?
We tend to repeat those mistakes in predictable ways.
Not just a case of the Mondays, then.
Think of it like this. Imagine you've got a friend and they keep falling for the same type of person, even though it always ends badly, right? At some point, it's like, okay, there's a pattern here, some kind of blind spot that's messing with their ability to be rational in that area.
If it's not just these performance glitches, does that mean that being rational is the same as being intelligent?
Good question.
Are Stanovich and West saying that smart people have it all figured out?
They found that there was actually a really weak correlation between intelligence and rationality.
You can be really smart, but still fall prey to irrational thinking.
It's good news because it means that intelligence isn't a requirement for being able to improve your thinking. Rationality, unlike intelligence, is something we can actually work on and develop.
So how do we do that?
It starts with understanding what exactly we mean when we say rationality.
Because if it's not just pure logic, then what is it? The lecture mentioned that the actual word itself, the etymology, is important.
It is.
Unpack that for me.
The root of rationality is ratio, which means proper proportion. Instead of just being about logic, rationality could be more about knowing how to properly allocate your attention, like weighing different factors and changing your perspective based on the situation.
What's rational in a debate could be a disaster if you're in a crisis and have to think on your feet.
Exactly. This is where our expert brings up bounded rationality. We're working with limited brain power and information.
We can't analyze every single thing.
Exactly. Our brains aren't wired that way.
Which makes me think about those two systems of thinking.
Yeah.
Our fast, intuitive system 1, and then our slower, more deliberate system 2.
Right.
It seems like bounded rationality could be the key to figuring out which one we should use and when.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like that classic thought experiment. You can like trolley barreling towards 5 people, and you can pull a lever to divert it to a track with only one person.
Tough choice. Morally ambiguous for sure, but also a great example of those two systems clashing, right? Your gut reaction, system 1 might be like, no way. But then if you think about it, system 2, you might make a different choice.
Finding that balance seems like a crucial part of being rational.
Are you saying that sometimes, like in that trolley problem, the most rational thing is to trust your gut?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, our intuitions, they've evolved to help us navigate, really complicated situations, often more effectively than our conscious minds can.
Okay, remember those heuristics, those mental shortcuts? They're often driven by system 1.
Okay.
And in the right context, they can be efficient.
So it's not about picking one system over the other. It's more about understanding the strengths and weaknesses of each and knowing when to use which.
Exactly. It all comes back to that ratio idea, finding the right proportion, the right balance.
That.
The lecture mentions mindfulness. You ever tried that?
I dabble. I haven't quite figured out how to make it like a daily thing. How does mindfulness tie into all of this?
Some people who practice mindfulness say that by quieting that monkey mind,
All that chatter.
all that mental chatter, creates space for those intuitive insights to come through.
It's like you're calming down system 2 so that system 1 can do its thing.
We're not trying to get rid of one or the other. We want them to work together.
It's all about harmony, balance.
Okay. This is starting to feel a lot more empowering. We all have the potential to be more rational.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter how smart we are or how many times we've tripped up in the past.
Exactly.
Where do we start?
Yeah.
What does that look like in real life?
Imagine you're at a party and someone brings up a topic you have really strong feelings about, like politics or maybe the best way to make coffee.
Everyone's got their thing.
Exactly. An actively open-minded person would be aware of their own biases. They wouldn't just be waiting for their turn to talk.
Right.
They would actually be listening to the other person, looking for things they can agree with or learn from, even if they don't agree with everything.
Being open to the idea that you might be wrong, even about coffee.
And that's tough, right? Because we live in a world where everyone's so certain about everything.
That's true.
That willingness to be okay with not knowing everything, that's a big part of rationality.
It almost sounds like it's not just about how much you know, but
Yeah.
your relationship to that knowledge.
Yes.
Being curious and willing to question things.
That's exactly it. This whole approach to knowledge starts to sound a lot like what you find in a lot of wisdom traditions.
Are you saying ancient wisdom might hold some secret keys to becoming more rational?
It's worth thinking about. Our expert throws us a curveball. He challenges the standard model of rationality we've been talking about.
All right.
This is where things get really interesting.
So we've been talking about rationality, like finding that sweet spot between logic, intuition, and being open-minded.
Right.
But now you're saying there's more to it, a challenge to this whole idea.
You know how we were talking about bounded rationality? The fact that we don't have all the time and brain power to make decisions?
It's like we're working with limited resources.
Our expert says that what counts as rational can depend on the situation you're in.
So something that seems totally irrational in one context
Right.
would actually be the best move.
It's all relative, like those mental shortcuts, heuristics. In a predictable environment, sticking to a logical plan might be best. In the real world, which is messy, those quick heuristics can be more effective than overthinking things.
Don't judge a fish by how well it climbs a tree. What works in one place might not work somewhere else.
And our intuition has been dealing with this stuff forever.
It's evolved with us.
Picks up on things our conscious minds miss.
Doesn't that go against, like, being actively open-minded? If we're just going with our gut, are we going to be biased?
That's the tightrope we walk. We have to be aware of the limits of both our gut and our analytical thinking. Neither one gets it right every time. Our expert says we have a moral obligation to become more rational.
Why is that?
With AI getting more advanced, we need to navigate this new world carefully.
I see what you're saying.
We might be the models for AI that's not just smart, but also rational and ethical.
How we think now could impact AI in the future.
It's a lot of responsibility, but it shows how important this all is.
It's bigger than us.
It's about a way of thinking that could shape humanity.
Where do we go from here? We've talked about mindfulness, open-mindedness, knowing our biases, anything else.
That's the question, isn't it? We each have to find our own way. The journey is where the growth happens. When we question things, accept uncertainty.
Find that balance.
It opens up new ways of seeing ourselves and the world.
There you have it, folks. If you want to dive deeper into rationality, this lecture is a great place to start. Until next time.